What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Marty Supreme, directed by Josh Safdie and starring Timothée Chalamet. And because this movie's not coming out nationwide until next week, I'll be going 100% spoiler-free. But what is not a spoiler is that for basically the first hour of this movie, it is my favorite movie of 2025, where it was exhilarating, it was adversarial, it was stylish, it was intense, it was funny, it was aggressive. It was all the things that I want to see in a movie. And if, like me, you've been craving a really intense, nail-biting experience like Good Time or Uncut Gems, two of the earlier movies that Josh Safdie directed with his brother Benny Safdie, well, then you're going to be thrilled and delighted by Marty Supreme. The only downside is that it's a 2.5-hour movie, and the last hour and a half is just a really good movie, whereas the first hour of the movie is fucking awesome. And there's something about a good sports movie when done well that can really generate a massive emotional response in the audience. So basically for like that first hour, for the first big ping pong tournament in the movie, I was basically just doing cartwheels in my seat, thinking to myself, like, I finally found the movie that I can go to bat for, go to the mat for, and really just say, like, this is the best that movies have to offer in 2025. The question now, though, is, if 1 hour of an insanely good movie and an additional 90 minutes of a pretty good movie, when you combine those together, can it still be my number one movie of 2025? Because I've not yet seen Sentimental Value, and I hear from a lot of people that Sentimental Value is the best movie of the year, and so I will hopefully see that over the next couple days. Because shortly after Christmas, I'll be teaming up with 3 of my friends to do a top 10 list for the year. So over the next couple days, I'll have to do some serious soul searching about what is my favorite movie of 2025. But I think a lot of people are going to come to the same conclusion that I did, that this is the best work of Timothée Chalamet's career. Now, I won't pretend that I've seen all of his movies, but of the movies that I've seen, goddamn, like, he is as charismatic, but also unscrupulous as they come in this movie. And I love a movie where you've got, not necessarily an anti-hero, but somebody where you believe in them and you want to see them do well, but you don't necessarily trust them all that much like Adam Sandler's character in Uncut Gems. And I think Uncut Gems is still the most entertaining movie that Josh Safdie has directed, but obviously he just shares credit there with Benny Safdie. I don't like Marty Supreme quite as much as I liked Uncut Gems, a movie which I saw over and over and over again.
See, you're already following it way better. Look at his eyes. You're looking more engaged now.
Buddy, custom ball like that, it's gonna cost a lot of money.
Of course it's custom. It's original ball for an original guy. It's a Marty Supreme ball, not the Marty normal ball.
But having now seen most of Josh Safdie's movies, and more importantly, having now seen what Josh and Benny Safdie do when they're working independently from one another, I feel confident in saying that Josh Safdie is one of the most talented directors that is active today. Like, whether your list of your favorite directors includes three filmmakers or 20 filmmakers, whatever the number might be, I feel like Josh Safdie, he belongs in that conversation. But let me slow down a bit and talk about what this movie is in broad strokes before I go into any greater details. So here's the official premise. Marty Supreme is a ping pong drama set in New York City during the 1950s where up-and-coming tennis table star Marty Mauser goes to hell and back in pursuit of greatness. And apparently the movie is loosely inspired by American table tennis player Marty Reisman. To what degree the movie takes liberties with his life, I really have no idea. I'm not an authority on ping pong or table tennis, but if the real Marty were alive today, I don't know how he'd feel about this movie. Because on one hand, Timothée Chalamet is delivering this big, bold, ambitious movie star performance, much like last year when he played Bob Dylan in A Complete Unknown. On the other hand, he's not the world's most savory individual. He's a little amoral, and basically he's a dog-eat-dog kind of guy. And if he has to step on your neck to get ahead in life, he absolutely will. But that is the entire tone and atmosphere of this movie. For basically 2.5 hours, it's a lot of tough-talking New Yorkers just talking shit and being incredibly aggressive, but being incredibly aggressive more often than not in incredibly creative, humorous ways. And I like mean and nasty humor. I like when actors are going for the jugular. And I imagine that it got a little tense on the set from time to time with these actors just saying the most savage things to each other humanly possible. And that's definitely not everybody's cup of tea. I talked to a lot of people when they saw Uncut Gems where they just found the entire experience to be exhausting. They just couldn't handle that level of aggression sustained over the course of an entire movie. So if that applies to you, maybe Marty Supreme will not be your movie. But if you enjoy a lot of conflict and confrontation and aggression in your movies, Marty Supreme will absolutely scratch that itch.
Hey, I'll rip that unibrow right off his forehead! You want to get physical? Like an ape?
But I think one of the main reasons that I responded so enthusiastically to this movie is that Josh Safdie, as a filmmaker and as a film historian and just all-around film enthusiast, he recognizes what movies should aspire to be, as opposed to a lot of other directors today where they seem to be making like the antithesis of cinema. For me, cinema should be big, bold, visual storytelling with a lot of emotion, a lot of style, and you basically need incredible artistry in every department, and he has assembled one of the most astonishing crews you could possibly imagine to bring this movie to the screen. And if you look throughout all of film history, pick any great movie that you've fallen in love with that you've seen many times. Usually, if you look at the cast and crew very carefully, you'll see a variety of legends all working on that movie at the same time, where you need great writing, great DP, great production design, great composer, great actors, obviously, a great director, but very few great movies are made by a one-man band. Most great movies are made by an incredible crew, and here are a few of the people that worked on Marty Supreme. And let's start with probably the biggest legend working on this movie, production designer Jack Fisk. If you look him up on IMDb, both as a production designer as well as an art director, it's almost embarrassing how many legendary directors he's worked with, from David Lynch to Terrence Malick to Brian De Palma, where you're just like, oh my God, he was the production designer and or art director on like 15 or 20 of the best movies ever made. And I guarantee you, Josh Safdie has seen each and every single one of them. But I'm talking about movies like Mulholland Drive or Badlands or Phantom of the Paradise or Days of Heaven. And to top it all off, the lucky dog ended up marrying Sissy Spacek, one of my favorite movie crushes of all time. And Jack Fisk, he's got to be getting close to 80 years old at this point, but goddamn, his gifts and his talents as a production designer are 100% intact. This movie vividly brings to life the New York of a bygone era, and the movie had a pretty big budget, especially for A24. I'm seeing here that the budget's estimated between 60 and 70 million, and you could tell that this team did everything in their power to make as much of that money appear on the screen as humanly possible. But I'm a sucker for good movies set in New York, and Marty Supreme absolutely knocked it out of the park when it came to recreating like the vibe and the flavor and the tone of New York in the 1950s. But if you're lucky enough to work with someone like Jack Fisk, you also need an incredible director of photography to make sure that you're capturing all those incredible sets as beautifully as humanly possible. And Darius Kanji, goddamn, like every single shot in this movie, even if the movie felt like it was kind of dragging or was overly long, like it is absolute chocolate for the eyes if you enjoy good photography. But some of the movies that he's shot are movies like Seven for David Fincher, or Delicatessen, or Amour for Michael Haneke, or Midnight in Paris for Woody Allen, and also, surprise, surprise, Uncut Gems for Josh and Benny Safdie. So fingers crossed, Darius Kanji, he and Josh Safdie will continue to work together for many years to come, because they definitely seem to bring out the best in each other. And speaking of Josh Safdie's regular collaborators, the movie also reunites him with composer Daniel Lopatin, if I'm saying his last name correctly, but he also did the score for Good Time as well as Uncut Gems. So if you love the music in those movies, well then yeah, it'll come as no surprise that the music in Marty Supreme is extraordinary. Both the score for the movie as well as the soundtrack, because the movie does an interesting thing where inside the context of a scene, the music's all 1950s music, but when it comes to like the soundtrack of the movie, Josh Safdie is like, he's basically pulling from any era that he likes. So I would say that from start to finish, the music throughout this movie is solid gold. The question is it as good a soundtrack as the soundtrack for Uncut Gems? Because back when that movie came out, and how can I say this delicately, I was dating somebody at the time where we used to be intimate to that soundtrack, and we just loved it. And if you're looking for great music to make love to, look up the soundtrack to Uncut Gems. But there are a lot of great soundtracks out there for that. So maybe Marty Supreme is not quite on that level. Although, speaking of sex, there's some sex in this movie. Gwyneth Paltrow's got to be old enough at this point to be Timothée Chalamet's mother. She has several intimate scenes with Timothée Chalamet that I won't say they are explicit, but they're definitely as intense as the rest of the movie, and I thought she did a fantastic job in this movie. She plays a retired actress by the name of Kay Stone, who forms an unusual relationship with the character of Marty, especially as Marty starts to lock horns with and try to take advantage of her husband, who's an incredibly wealthy businessman who may or may not be taking an interest in the world of ping pong in order to promote his business of selling pens around the world.
And it's only a matter of time before I'm staring at you from the cover of a Wheaties box.
And Kevin O'Leary, who plays the husband of Gwyneth Paltrow's character, anytime he's on the screen with Timothée Chalamet and they start locking horns, that is where the movie really soars, because you've got the old distinguished businessman who's got all the resources and the private jets and he can do whatever he wants. And then you have Marty, where all he has is his talent and his drive. But both of them are pretty, neither of them are afraid to indulge in a little scumbaggy behavior. And there's several scenes where these two actors just absolutely go to war. And I just loved every second of it. I almost wanted to have a movie like My Dinner with Andre, where the two of them would just go sit in a restaurant and talk for a few hours, but instead of having intellectual conversations, instead they would just, like spit insults at each other. In any case, Kevin O'Leary is an actor that I wasn't super familiar with before this movie, but goddamn, he and Timothée Chalamet, let's just say they make excellent dance partners in this flick. But earlier I mentioned how Josh Safdie did an incredible job of surrounding himself with incredible technicians behind the camera. But what's interesting about this flick is how in front of the camera, he also recruited some really good filmmakers to act as opposed to direct, which is what they're more famous for. Or in the case of David Mamet, he's a great writer. I mean, he wrote like Glengarry Glen Ross, and he's directed some really good movies like House of Games. But he's in this movie. But Abel Ferrara plays a pretty massive role in this movie. And for all you youngins out there who didn't have the privilege of growing up during the 1990s, Abel Ferrara was probably the meanest and nastiest practitioner of gangster movies and cop dramas at that time, more than anyone else. Like it was a true like second golden age for the gangster film at that time. But Abel Ferrara, he came up through the ranks making porn and horror movies, movies like The Driller Killer, where he played the main role. His first big movie was Miss 45, which was one of the most savage movies of the 1980s. But he really started to bloom in the early 90s with movies like King of New York and Bad Lieutenant. And if you're a fan of completely relentless and utterly ruthless crime films set in New York, Abel Ferrara is absolutely untouchable on that front. So it's fitting that Abel Ferrara plays a pretty mean and nasty, unsavory character in this movie. And he's like 1,000 years old at this point, but he's always been a pretty intense, unlikable guy in interviews, and he channels all those unlikable qualities into this character that he's playing. You know, brilliant filmmaker, but kind of tough to listen to. But in any case, you can tell that Josh Safdie is tipping his hat to one of the other great New York directors that he obviously has an enormous amount of respect for by giving him such a prominent role in this movie. And if you're at all sensitive about on-screen violence or on-screen brutality, brace yourself because Abel Ferrara is in a particularly memorable one in this movie. But getting down to the story itself, and once again, no spoilers, but what's interesting about Marty Supreme is how it kind of combines two different genres or two different kinds of sports movies in one, because there are a lot of sports movies that are more about like the hustle and the con and the lying and the deception in order to make a quick buck. You know, movies like The Hustler and the sequel Color of Money. If you're into pool movies, like especially pool hustling movies, those movies fucking rule. Or movies like White Men Can't Jump, when you got Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson basically hustling people on the basketball court. And that's a different kind of sports movie from like official international competitions, but that's another area where Marty Supreme thrives, because at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie, we see Marty competing on the world stage. And he's got a very interesting adversary in this movie, a character that we don't really get to know that well, but he's a fascinating adversary, but a character by the name of Endo, who comes from Japan. He's played by Koto Kawaguchi, and he's very stoic and very serious, and he has an unusual grip, an unusual playing style, where it's almost like somebody coming out with like a samurai sword or like a new technique, where Marty's like shaking his boots like, wait, what the fuck's he doing? Like, how come he's serving in such an unusual way? But in the end, whether you're watching a movie about hustling or a movie about sports, you want to see great athleticism. And I'm not an expert on the sport of ping pong or table tennis, but I would say that on the whole, I was convinced by the athleticism and the tricks. And I'm sure they're just using digital balls for most of the movie, but Timothée Chalamet is hurling himself into it with every serve and slice, etc. He's just like, it's an incredibly physical performance, but whether or not it'll hold up to intense scrutiny of actual table tennis enthusiasts, who the hell knows? I just don't have that expertise. But so far, I've basically been slobbering all over this movie and offering no critiques or criticisms. So why does this movie start to kind of fall off after that really intense first hour? I think the big problem is that there are a lot of scenes that kind of accomplish the same goal in the context of the story, because over the course of the movie, we see repeatedly how he's constantly using people or taking advantage of people in order to try to get ahead. And if his plans or schemes or goals were to work, well, then everybody would probably be very happy with the result. But anytime his plans go awry, he basically has to burn his bridge to that person. Like, all right, well, that didn't work out, so let me take advantage of this other person. And we probably see 3 or 4 too many examples of the same scenes accomplishing the same purpose, which once again makes the movie feel overly long. I was definitely aware of the length, and I feel like if this movie were like an hour and 45 minutes, it would be a fucking slam dunk, just massive blockbuster, massive hit. But anytime people start checking their watch or thinking about how they want to go to the bathroom, or they start looking forward to the conclusion, you're going to lose some people, especially when the movie is kind of a mean and nasty, aggressive movie, which can be very emotionally taxing and physically exhausting. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who basically just kind of check out. Like, you know what? I've had all my fun, but I'm going home. And if I'd been sitting in the editing room and looking over the shoulder of Josh Safdie as well as his editor, Ronald Bronstein, and I should also add that Josh Safdie's editor, Ronald Bronstein, also co-wrote the screenplay with him, what I would have recommended is cut any scene that's not related to ping pong or table tennis. Like, if you want to show him being a son of a bitch, show him being a son of a bitch in the context of ping pong. But there are a lot of scenes outside the world of ping pong. Like, you know what? I get it. We're kind of retreading familiar terrain at this point. Can we just move on with the story and see whether or not Marty Supreme will ultimately be supreme or reign supreme or crash and burn and meet with failure at the end of the movie? So that would be the only real critique, is that there are too many scenes not related to ping pong that ultimately start to feel a little bit redundant. And it's a shame because so much of the movie is just absolutely riveting. It's wildly entertaining. Whether he's competing in Japan or hustling ping pong games here in New York, it's a cool fucking flick. And I imagine that a lot of people are going to be just absolutely wild about the movie. I just don't anticipate it being as much of a success as it deserves to be, because just a tad on the long side. And if I were in A24's shoes, I would have said, look, make whatever movie you want, but we're going to cut you off at 2 hours. Like, we love your vision, we love your style, we love your talent, we love everything about you, and we want to make 5 to 10 more movies with you over the next couple of decades, but cap this movie at 2 hours and let's move on and make the next movie. So it remains to be seen just how well this movie will do when it comes to awards and box office. But let me have a quick glance at some of my placeholders for my favorite movies of the year and see how well it compares, and if I feel confident in saying that it is my number one. So I've got Sinners, Fuck 'Em All, Wake Up Dead Man, Warfare, Weapons, Demon Slayer, Infinity Castle, Becoming Led Zeppelin, the double feature by Richard Linklater of Blue Moon as well as Nouvelle Vague, Chainsaw Man, the movie Reze Arc, Virgin Punk, Clockwork Girl, Bring Her Back, I Like Me, Caught Stealing, The Shrouds, Secret Mall Apartment, that one's definitely going to be top 5. And then I've got the 1-2 punch of One Battle After Another / Eddington, which I feel like both of those movies kind of hold up a mirror to society to see just how fucking crazy we've gone. I prefer Eddington over One Battle After Another. The question is, do I prefer Eddington over Marty Supreme? I think I like Marty Supreme more, or at least I'd be more inclined to rewatch Marty Supreme, because as great a movie as Eddington might have been, I don't want to revisit 2020 ever. It's like the worst year in human history, whereas Marty Supreme is a very different kind of experience. But I think at this point I've said all that I need to say. I remain incredibly bullish about the future career prospects for both Timothée Chalamet as well as Josh Safdie. Who knows? Maybe they'll work together again. If Timothée Chalamet wins that Oscar that he's been chasing so brazenly, who knows what the future might hold? But I look forward to seeing him in the next Dune movie. And Josh Safdie, he's one of those directors where he's in the tradition of really good directors who do a great job of capturing the city of New York. And obviously that family of filmmakers would include Martin Scorsese or Spike Lee or Woody Allen or Sidney Lumet or Abel Ferrara. And as somebody who lives here in New York, I think it's really cool when good directors decide to make multiple movies set in this town. But my biggest takeaway about Josh Safdie after seeing this movie is that he's clearly still in love with the medium of film, the history of film. Just the title sequence of this movie alone, without saying what it is delightful. It kind of tips its hat or pays homage to a hit comedy from the 1980s, but it kind of puts a fresh spin on it. But I was just cracking up uproariously throughout the entire sequence. So yeah, Josh Safdie, with each movie that I see by him, I become more of a fan. And so Josh Safdie, whatever you do next, I'll be first in line. I am a believer in your talents and gifts. But I think, yeah, it's time to wrap this sucker up. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.